Hamilton always loved horses. Steeplechase and horse racing were once popular sporting events.
But the rich used to go to Muskoka. But the others, the rest had it all in that bay. It was just like a Muskoka.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
The railway was elevated on concrete and iron pilings, like a bridge in its construction, at about a 30-degree angle.
The most common entry into Hamilton at the turn of the century would have been by rail. Staring out of the coach window, one would have marveled at all the activity on the bay. Sailboats glided under a soft breeze, while some boats were just being built. Gangs of men moved cargo down at the coal and wheat wharves. Another group of immigrants arrived as the train pulls into the Stewart Street station. Names like Mahoney, Murphy, Askew, Gibb, Poloniato, Thompson, Agro, and others would soon take their place within the community mosaic.
John Morrison Gibson was one of the certainly dominant figures in 19th, early 20th century Hamilton history. It even started when he was still a pupil at Central School. He happened to be called on to officially turn on the water in Gore Park, which was quite a feather in his cap. He was an extremely powerful man in terms of Hamilton's transportation, electricity needs, and then politically as well. And he even later became the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. So he was one of the key people in so many aspects of Hamilton in the 19th century.
We learned to tell the time by the trains when we were little. My mother'd go to work and she'd tell us, now when 5062 comes in, and then you have your lunch. We would watch for 5062. But sometimes they'd put another one in, you see. So we'd be watching for 5062, and 5574 would come in with the train. So we were stuck there. We didn't have no lunch.
The bad times in the 30s there, the people would fish that have 4 or 5 rods sticking out of the wall with a bell on the fish line. The bell would ring, well, maybe they'd have a carp and be, well, they had their supper, you know.
And the CNR train used to come along here and stop. There used to be a lot of guys riding the rails. Of course, as soon as they got off, they were hungry. They'd walk along the shoreline, come knock on the door and want to get a sandwich. See? So my wife answered the door. First guy. She said, sure, come on in. The guy looked pretty good. He's just passing through town. So we give him a sandwich and a cup of tea and that. So he thanks us and away he goes. He's not going to have an hour, another guy comes. The guy spread the word around. And they kept coming all summer.
I believe I started going to the bars naturally as an underage drinker like everybody else did, but it was easier to get away with it in those days. So I think I would have started in the late 50s and certainly visited a lot of these establishments until I moved to Toronto in the mid-60s. There were, at that time, many dives around Hamilton, the old beverage rooms style hotels, but there was 5 main bars downtown that were quite hopping. One was the Flamingo, or the Flam as we used to call it. My brother remembers being thrown through those swinging doors there many times, but not me. Then there was the Grange, of course, it was a Chinese restaurant when Ronnie Hawkins started there, played there all the time. And then there was the Golden Rail. They all had live bands all the time, every night of the week, and very good R&B guys, rock and roll people, the whole thing. Then there was Duffy's Tavern. That was another one that was right down there across from Gore Park. I can recall very well seeing Ike and Tina Turner there back in the early 60s. A terrific show, I might add.
Crown Point began as a racetrack. The Hamilton Jockey Club, designed to be the finest in North America, held its first race on June 1st, 1893. On race day, patrons paid a 50-cent admission to the field, or a $1 admission to the grounds and grandstand. The grandstand, described simply as handsome, faced south toward the mountain and could seat up to 1,500 people. The grounds featured two racetracks, one within the other. In the center was a steeplechase track complete with water jumps. Inside, guests found a sprawling property complete with a clubhouse, betting ring, saddling paddocks, and stables. The first winner at the track was a horse named Victorious, who won by a nose. The old track enjoyed a long life, but finally, in 1952, came to the end of the line.
With one bale of tobacco, George Tuckett proclaimed himself a cigar manufacturer when he was barely out of his teens in 1857. When plug tobacco became a scarce commodity south of the border during the American Civil War, George took advantage of an opportunity and made his first fortune. Over 600 employees worked in a clean and safe environment, shipping product worldwide from a factory built at Queen and York Streets in the 1860s. Tuckett's factory was state-of-the-art and made his company the largest producer of cigars and tobacco in the country. By 1892, Tuckett unveiled plans for a stately mansion befitting his status to be built at the corner of King and Queen Streets. The building will be situated on one of the finest sites in Hamilton and will be a grand addition to the city's many fine residences, among which it will stand in the first rank. It would later be taken over by the Scottish Rite Masons in 1920. Bought out by Imperial Tobacco on September 17, 1966, the Hamilton-based company would finally close its doors after nearly 109 years in business.
The escarpment created quite a barrier to transportation. There was a set of stairs that gave you access to the Mountain View Hotel, but it wasn't until 1892 that the novelty of an incline railway was built.
The hotel was poised to become a major tourist attraction when the city introduced the Hamilton and Barton Incline Railway. The incline at James Street had two tracks, each carrying a 36-foot-long car. As one went up, the other would descend, traversing the 195-foot elevation in less than 90 seconds. Each railway car could hold dozens of pedestrians with room for 2 horse-drawn wagons. That is, until the automobile made its entrance.
And
And not only was that a good location for the incline, just for the purpose of moving people up and down the escarpment, but it tied in nicely with the hotel, because now the hotel's business really took off, because a person from Toronto could take a steamer to Hamilton, get off at the base of James Street, take a streetcar all the way up to the end of the line where it met the incline, take the incline up to the Mountain View Hotel, have an afternoon there and go home.
The Canadian Illustrated News once wrote, "The bay on the shores of which Port Hamilton was founded is one of the finest and most placid to be found among Canadian lakes." Late in the 18th century, Lady Simcoe tried to capture the essence of the bay's charm in her sketches.
Further west of this terrace we saw Coutts Paradise. It abounds with wild fowl and tortoises. From hence it appears more like a river or lake than a marsh.
By 1912, Hamilton would become second only to Montreal as an international seaport with nearly 5 miles of dockage space. The inlets were first to be filled in, and then more and more of the bay would be claimed for industrial and shipping use. Otis Elevator chose Hamilton where it would become the largest single elevator manufacturing facility in the world. More major manufacturers would follow: Procter & Gamble, Hoover, National Steel Car, Firestone, and Canadian Canners, all the who's who of industry.
Sir Allan McNabb was a key figure in Hamilton history, particularly in the years 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. He was a lawyer, he was a real estate speculator, and he was also a businessman. And one of his key projects that he was involved in heavily was the Great Western Railway. Now, the Great Western Railway didn't have to come into Hamilton specifically, but Sir Allan McNabb insisted that it go right past his estate, Dundurn, into Hamilton, because he knew that if the railway came to Hamilton, that spelt ultimate growth and success for the city that he promoted heavily.
Hello, we're standing in front of the Kinraid Monument here in the Hamilton Cemetery, and this is an unsolved murder of Ethel Kinraid. The story goes that Ethel and her sister Florence were in the Herkimer house that they lived in, and a tramp came to the door demanding money. Florence went upstairs to get the money, heard the shots, came downstairs, and Ethel was dying on the floor, and the tramp had run away. During the inquest, the story changed radically, and suspicion fell on Florence, the sister, of killing her own sister, Ethel. How that came about was that Florence was a vaudeville actress, and she traveled Canada, North America, the US, and on the road she met a man, and that man was sending love letters back to Herkimer Street, her address, and her sister Ethel intercepted them and was demanding to give them to Florence's fiancé, who happened to be a minister here in Hamilton. When Ethel's body was found by the police, they found 6 shots in her body, 2 of them in the heart. That made the suspicion that it was an act of passion.
There used to be a bath house down at the foot of Burlington Street called McDonald's Baths. You used to walk out
where would that be, at Bay Street?
On Bay Street, right at Burlington Street there. Right. And you walked out along like a walk. That had a long wooden walk out to it. Mm-hmm. And all it was on the outside here, you swam inside of this here area here that was cleaned of weeds. And you paid a nickel.
Who owned that?
It belonged to the city. It belonged to the city of Hamilton. And you paid a nickel to get in. They charged you a nickel for a cake of soap and a towel. All the kids used to bum a nickel to get out the bay to swim.
What happened to those baths?
Oh, they burned down.
Did they?
Yeah.
No, none of burnt down, blew down.
Blew down.
Yeah,
Oh,
a big
good.
northeast storm.
It seems that some folklore may indeed be left to speculation.
When nothing but fields existed beyond the city limits, Crown Point had a real estate boom. The idea of building a suburb was a crazy notion. There were no good roads, only wooden planks for sidewalks. A horse watering trough was the only source of clean water. People came from all around the neighborhood to fill up their pails. Crown Point's muddy conditions were well known in other parts of the city. However, young families longed to have a home of their own, and it was a working man's best chance to buy a house for only $10 down. J. Walter Gage went from realtor to public benefactor overnight when he offered affordable housing to working families in 1904.
In winter, the industry of cutting and hauling ice carried on between games of shinny and curling.
From the beach canal up to this West End Canal. See, well, that's where the old sailing vessels used to go up there, so it made a channel, and that's where the clear water was.
I see.
That's where they used to cut the ice over there and then channel it all over to this side.
And then they'd haul it up into the ice houses on these elevated things, you know, and put it in tiers with straw between it. And it was piled up stories high, you know.
The times were changing rapidly. The Cycle Club was being replaced by the Automobile Club. To win over the many skeptics who felt the horseless carriage and their drivers were an affront to man and beast, an auto tour of the county was organized on Tuesday, September 13th, 1904. Lawmakers and other prominent citizens to be won over were invited to go along for the ride. The first automobile in the area was purchased in 1898, although roads were treacherous. If you ran 25 miles without a tire puncture, you were doing well. Horseshoe nails were a common source of aggravation. Politicians became so enthused during the excursion, they were not satisfied with the 12 miles an hour speed limit. The faster they went, the better they liked it. At times, a speed of 25 miles an hour was reached, passing everything in sight. The 50-mile demonstration tour by the Hamilton Automobile Club did have the desired effect of getting the speed limit increased on country roads. Further, it removed some of the suspicion around the horseless carriage and its drivers.
While the world was distracted by the British invasion of 1964, a small coffee shop opens quietly on Ottawa Street North. The proprietor, a local hockey hero named Tim Horton, who played for the reigning NHL Stanley Cup champions, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
And if the business that I am involved in continues as it is, I may have to consider retirement before I would live to. That's the Tim Horton Donut Emporium? Yes, Tim Horton Donuts for it, and it's very nice to be able to let me get a word in about it. I'd like to say thank you to all the nice people in the Hamilton and Burlington districts, and Galls and Brantford and Kitchener-Waterloo for enjoying my donuts.
They used to go across the bay there and have a lot, and you could fish over there too, though. The water was clear as crystal.
Yeah.
And we had a ball on that place. I sure think about it time and again. It seemed to be part of my life and when I was a kid. Never leaves you.
But always the ruckus play and hard work of those times was tempered by the beauty of Hamilton's Bay.
That boathouse, Bastien's, was sort of an elaborate place. They used to put, on the rowboats, there'd be carpet on the bottom of the boat. There'd be steps down and then you step right into the boat.
Right.
And they'd have these parasols, you know, these fancy parasols.
Yeah.
And you couldn't beat it for pleasure in the summertime.
Yeah. It was a packed place.
Yeah.
Everybody was down there all the time.